main idea we want to keep in mind is that slope-intercept form. So everybody, somewhere on the top of your paper, I want you to put the y equals mx plus b, because we're going to go back and use that multiple times. We'll be using that today, and we'll also be having to find slope again today. So we're going to keep in the y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. So yesterday we were given these pieces of information and we wrote a line. We're going to keep practicing that same idea. We're just going to be given different things each time now. So it's asking us to write an equation in slope-intercept form, and we're given a slope and we're given a point. So what we're going to be doing is plugging in a number for m and a number for x and y. So the first thing we have to take into account is our point. So this point 2, 2, remember all points we can write as x, y. And those can be inputs and outputs. We can plug both of those things in for x and y. We can also plug m. We can plug 2 in for m. So if we have our slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b, we can take our 2 value, that is our slope, in red there, and plug it in for m. We can also take our point 2, 2 and plug in for our x value and our y value. So we could have a 2 take the place of this x and a 2 take the place of this y. And that's what I'll do now. And then you see the only thing that's not colored now is b. And that's what we're going to be trying to find today. We did kind of an example of this type of problem yesterday, but we found the slope as well. The slope wasn't given to us. So I'd say, okay, well, 2 has to go here, equal to my slope of 2. That's being multiplied by the 2 for x. So again, this 2 is going in here, this 2 is going in there. And then I'm left with plus b. That's what I'm solving for. So if I do some simplification here, I could take 2 times 2. I know that's 4. So I could say 2, I'll draw it up here. 2 is equal to 4 plus b. And we want a value for b. We're going to get b by itself, however you want to think about it. So we can subtract 4 from both sides. That'll get us b by itself on that one side. So 2 minus 4, that would be negative 2. So we could say b is equal to negative 2. And now we have the 2 things that we need to write an equation of a line. We have our slope, which is one thing that we need. We also need our b value. These are the 2 things we're going to plug into y equals mx plus b. So you'd say y is equal to our slope of 2, x minus 2. Where this is your m value, this is your b value. So I would describe this problem as just plugging things in. Or the biggest challenge is just knowing what to plug them in for, what number goes in each spot. After that, you're just solving for a variable. It's usually only a one-step equation, and then rewriting your line out. We're going to try another example of this, but this time, we're going to crank up the difficulty a little because our slope is going to be a fraction. We're used to now at this point seeing slopes as fractions to see the rise and the run. But now we're going to have to do some things with multiplying and adding with fractions. So I'm going to do all the same steps I did before. I'm going to label my -1 and -4 as my x and my y point. So there's not any questions of what I'm plugging it in for. So this -4 is going in for y. I say that's equal to my value of m, which is 3/4. That's being multiplied by my x value, which is -1. And then I don't know what b is yet, so I say plus b. If you're someone that likes if like arrows help when you're taking notes, if you want to say, okay, well this is going in this spot here, this 1 goes here, this -4 is kind of the front. Then if arrows just confuse you more, don't draw the arrows. So we're going to simplify. We can multiply 3/4 times -1. Any fraction or number multiplied by 1 is just itself. But since it's negative, it's going to be -3/4. So we'll say -4 is equal to -3/4 plus b. And now we have to solve for b. So to solve for b, we need to get rid of this -3/4. So we would say, okay, well, I know this is subtraction or a negative, so to undo a negative, it has to be a positive. I have to add 3/4 to both sides. So we say plus 3/4. So that cancels out. I'm going to write this in a new line. So we would have -4 plus 3/4 is equal to b. We have one issue right now, is that to add fractions, you need to have the same denominator. This denominator of -4 is 1. So you can't add these two together as is, because we're going to try to keep everything a fraction. What we can do is make this -4 have a denominator of 4. So you have to think, what divided by 4 is going to be 4? Well, it would be 16. So I could rewrite this -4 as -16 divided by 4. So notice this is still, or to simplify this is still -4. I just kind of found a loophole that now I can add these two numbers together because they have now the same denominator. So when you're adding fractions, you only add the numerator together and you keep the denominator the same. So we would have -13/4 is equal to b. And now we have the two things we need to write a line. We have a value of b, we have a value of m, and we can write our equation of our line. Y is equal to 3/4 x minus 13/4. Most of the time on a test or a quiz, I would purposely pick numbers so you wouldn't have to do anything too funky like this. But adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing fractions is something that we need to know how to do. All right. I know we've had kind of a break from doing a lot of computation math, and a lot of it's kind of just been big thinking and definitions. We're going to kind of go back to doing just a lot of math steps and a lot of arithmetic. All right. We're going to do these next two problems. We're going to leave the word problems alone for today. We could revisit them some other time. But we're just going to focus on A and B for problem 2. So now what's different is we're not given a slope. The only thing we have to do differently is find the slope on our own. Remember, we said we could find slope two ways. I suggested yesterday taking the approach of labeling your points and then using that point slope, not point slope form, the slope formula. So your y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. See if you can plug in your numbers while I answer the phone. We plug numbers in. On the top, we would have 5 minus 4. On our denominator, we would have 3 minus negative 6. Oh, sorry, just minus 6, not negative 6. I got ahead of myself. 3 minus 6. So simplifying this, we'd have a 1 on our numerator and a negative 3 on our denominator. Again, we're just finding the slope of between our 2 points. We now can take our slope in one of these points and do the same thing we were doing above. You can choose either one of these points to plug in. I always think it's easiest to go with the smallest numbers. So I'm going to be plugging in 3 and 5. I sometimes even like to do this, just because I know there's a lot of moving parts in this. Write out what you're going to plug in. I'm plugging in 3, 5 for my x and my y. My m value is negative 1/3. I'm trying to figure out what my b is. And this is all going into our y equals mx plus b form. So now I know 5 has to go in for y. Negative 1/3 would have to go in for m. 3 goes in for x. And I'm trying to find b. So if you're plugging everything in correctly, b should be the only thing that's left. From there is just arithmetic and solving. We can simplify. Negative 1/3 times 3 will be negative 1. You can say 5 is equal to negative 1 plus b. Again, when you're multiplying fractions, you can just multiply the numerator and the denominator. So this would be negative 3 divided by 3, which is negative 1. And then to get b by itself, we'd have to add 1 to both sides. So plus 1, b is equal to 6. So now since we listed everything, we have our 2 pieces of information to write our line. We could say y is equal to negative 1/3 x plus 6. All right, ready to this last example. I would say encourage you, if you feel like you can go ahead and go faster than the pace that I'm going at while I'm teaching, try it on your own. If you just are sitting back and you're still getting comfortable with the steps, that's totally fine too. But push yourself, just don't sit there and kind of copy like a robot. Think about what you're doing as you go. We have to find first the slope. The other alternative I gave for finding slope was kind of with last unit. I did these little, I don't know what you would call them, brackets. Or you say, okay, these are my difference in my x. To go from negative 2 to 6, I would have to add 8. Because negative 2 plus 8 is equal to 6. That's my change in x. To go from 0 to 4, well, that's plus 4. So our slope is 4 over 8. You're changing your y values. We go from, that would be the same thing as taking 4 minus 0 divided by your change in x values. That would be the same thing as taking 6 minus negative 2, which is 8. And then 4 over 8 is the same thing as 1/2. And we like multiplying by 2s or dividing by 2, so we're going to make it smaller. So we have one piece now. We know our m value is 1/2. We just need a point to plug in and to solve for b. Again, always go with the point that looks easier. Whenever we have 0 involved in a point, that's a good one to choose. 0 makes everything easy. So we're going to plug in -2, 0. Our m value we know is 1/2. We're figuring out what b is. So we could say 0 for y is equal to 1/2 times whatever our x value is, and that's -2, plus b. So you can see these are the two things that I'm plugging in. I already found this. These are my 2 points. 1/2 times -2 is going to be -1. So we have 0 is equal to -1 plus b. So then we add 1 to both sides. B would be equal to a +1. So again, we need to write this out in slope-intercept form. Y is equal to 1/2 x plus 1, and we're done.